listener. Welcome back to another episode of Lush Life, No Labels, a podcast where I talk about the struggles and joys of self improvement, anywhere from relationships, career, wellness, and more. I'm Fatu. Winter is coming. I don't know if you know that reference, but it's from a TV show called Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was a TV show that started off on a very high note. I actually was not one of the people who watched it at the beginning. I started watching it maybe 3 seasons in after a bunch of my friends raved about it and said it was a really good show. So I started watching it. And for anyone who's ever seen the show, Winter is Coming should be familiar because that's the main family, the Starks. That's their motto. They lived in a wintry place. And basically, the phrase was both a literal warning and a metaphorical statement. On one hand, it means that the family and everybody who lived in their kingdom needed to prepare for the dangers and hardships of wintertime. They used to have really long winters in Westeros that would bring famine and death. So it was just warning people, hey, you need to watch out because winter is a harsh time of year. On the other hand, again, if you've ever seen this show, there's a symbolism here because it foreshadows the threat of the White Walkers and serves as a reminder to the Starks that, hey, we live the most north out of any of these kingdoms. And if anyone is going to be attacked by the White Walkers, it's going to be us first. So we need to be really open and aware of that, even during this harsh time. Game of Thrones ended up crashing and burning, metaphorically and literally, but the show still had some good times. I'm starting with that because when I was thinking about this episode, which is going to focus on wintertime and preparing slash staying sane during the winter, that's one of the first things that came to mind. But another thing that comes to mind, actually, which is a memory I have from high school, is DIY sledding. When I was in high school, I lived away from home. So during the winter, we didn't have any actual sleds on campus. But what my friends and I would do in the evenings are we'd go to dinner, then we would get bundled up, get these, depending on who it was, some of us would have these boxes, and we would get boxes that were broken down from deliveries that people's parents had sent them, things like that. And then we would go, actually, there was one building on campus behind the science building where when it snowed a lot, and we lived in Massachusetts, so it was snowing a lot back when I was in high school. We would basically go, and there would be a giant slope, natural slope behind that place. So we would take all of our things and just one by one just start sledding down on these wooden boxes that we had broken down. And it was actually really, really fun. So that's one thing I remember on DIY sledding. And then after that, we would go to the dining hall and get some hot chocolate just to warm up after being outside, just jumping around in the snow. So I certainly have some positive memories of winter, but also some not so great ones in the wintertime. And as I've grown up, winter has been harder and harder for me as an adult. I've talked about it on this podcast before, but the winter season is just dark and gloomy overall. And it takes a lot for me to keep my head above water during these months. I am from West Africa. I'm from a tropical place, born and raised. And even though I've lived in America for a long time, for whatever reason, every time winter rolls around, it feels like the first time that I've ever experienced it. I remember moving to America and I moved in February time. I had never seen snow before. I'd never been in a place that was this cold before because, again, I was from the tropics. So back in those days, Getting out of the airport was similar to when people in Europe and Africa and other places get out of the airport. When you get out, you're directly outside. You don't just walk through from the plane through that little tunnel into the airport. So imagine it's February in early 2000s. I am supposed to be walking off of this plane. A gust of wind literally smacks me in the face, and I immediately turn around to try to get back on that plane. Y'all, the flight attendant was like, "Hey, little girl, you need to get off of the plane. You can't come back on here." And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. I want to go back to Africa. I can't do this." So that was my very first introduction to this country. It was harshly cold and it was dark outside. And I guess since then, my mind and my body have just never really accustomed to the winters. So, what I've started doing in the last few years is trying to get my bearings in order and trying to figure out, okay, instead of just accepting misery every single winter, let me try to figure out different ways to feel better during the wintertime and different ways to find joy in the wintertime. Because at different points of my life, I've been able to semi enjoy the winter, specifically, like I said, in high school. Also, when I was in college, surrounded by friends, we did a bunch of different things in the wintertime. So it made it a bit more exciting. But I found that the more and more I get older and I'm an adult, a lot of my friends aren't around as they used to be. It is a bit harder to maintain my personal sanity during this time. So let's dive right into how I approach the winter and what I plan on doing to prep this year. Before I jump into the basics of winter, I just want to highlight a few things that I've noticed. First things first, there are a lot of emotional and physical challenges of it being wintertime. Emotional because there's a lack of sun, it's dark all the time, it's cold all the time. Physically, again, it's cold. So you're just going to be feeling that all of the time as well. I already mentioned that the struggles for me, first and foremost, are the cold. And it really does affect my mood, my energy, and my motivation. The lack of sun is another big thing. Again, from the tropics. So there, it's sunny all the time. But here, it's not like that at all. We get up in the dark. And even before we leave the office, it's already dark outside. At 3:30, 4 p.m., it feels like it's 11 p.m., and that can be pretty gloomy, honestly. Winter also affects my general routine, which I'll talk about a bit later. But for me, it definitely tests my self discipline and my emotional resilience, which I don't always do the best at. So I definitely say that this is the hardest season each year for me. But like I said, trying to look at it in a different way. We'll see how well that works out. Last winter was a bit tough. I definitely had a few breakdowns, but I am hoping that this winter there will be a change because there have been some winters where I've actually been good at this, but we'll see. First things first, the basics, okay? Before we even talk about emotional, whatever else is going on in the wintertime, first thing is always the physical prep for this time of year. Overall, I always like to make sure that I prep to make sure that my body is warm indoors, of course, by turning on the heater, wearing warm clothes, but most importantly, outdoors for sure. I walk to get to my train, and then there's a little bit of a walk from there to my office. So I'm always outside, at least on those days. So I have to make sure that I am not suffering during that time. A giant coat that reaches past your knees, ideally down to your ankles if you get extremely cold, can protect you from the wind and just the temperature overall. A mid-sized coat is also nice to have for milder days, waterproof snow boots if you live in the Northeast like me and you expect there to be snow. People in the South, people on the West Coast, you guys don't have to deal with that. Another thing, too, thick socks that go up high. I try to avoid wearing those little socks that are better in the summertime. Winter is, I am covering up everything that I possibly can, and having those thick socks are really, really helpful in keeping my feet warm. Other things too, hats, gloves, scarves, all of those things can be helpful specifically when it's really windy, which where I work actually, there's a wind tunnel around there, so it's the windiest part of my city. So it's definitely important for me to have especially the hat and the scarf. And low key, I am considering buying one of those face mask, ski mask things for wind protection, but we'll see about that. They apparently sell some wool ones. Another thing that people like to do in the winter is to dress in layers. And to that, I say layers can be your best friend because it helps keep you more compact and more warm, especially if you're going to be spending a lot of time outside. Being physically comfortable and having these items does make winter physically easier because you're not freezing every time you go outside. Or even if you're just sitting in the house, it's still important to have sweaters and sweatpants that you can be warm in as you walk around your house. And for me, for example, every time I get a good set of gloves or a good winter hat that keeps my ears warm, I feel better about the season because I feel the effects of it on my body less as somebody who gets cold really easily. Now, outside of the clothes that I wear in the wintertime, another thing that really affects my mental stability is the decrease in sunlight. Not having sunlight definitely affects me because it decreases my energy and it also affects my mood negatively. Some things that I found have been helpful have been taking vitamin D supplements, which you can get over the counter. Since we are not getting in the sun that often, or in other cases, the sun's not really coming out that much, it's important to keep up that vitamin D that we would naturally get from the sun. Another way that you can simulate the sun in a way um, is buying a lamp that is very bright. Sometimes they're called sun lamps. I actually try to turn mine on the first thing in the morning to wake me up since the actual sun is not up that early. And I tend to work out early in the morning before work. And I really need the boost because I'll wake up, it's cold, I have no desire to get up and work out before work. So having this sunlight gives me a little booster and a little motivation to physically get up from laying down. When I didn't used to have it, I would really have to drag myself out of bed, but I actually have found that this is helpful to just have a bright light there. And the reason why I talk about sunlight and the decrease in mood is because there's something that I heard about called seasonal affective disorder, SAD. And according to Mayo Clinic, which is a very reputable hospital system, SAD is a type of depression that's related to changes in seasons. It typically begins and ends around the same time every year, of course, since it's following the season. And if you're like most people with this effect, you're going to start feeling like you're losing energy over time and you feel a bit moodier. And then when it starts getting more springtime and summer, then you actually start getting back to your old self. Of course, this does not happen to everyone. And just because you're sad in the winter doesn't automatically mean that you have this effect, but it's just important to check in with yourself if you start feeling down all of the time and you notice a big difference in your mood. So it's important to try to find some small ways to stay energized during the wintertime. Another aspect of winter that I've been trying to participate more in is being social. Essentially, trying to stay connected even when it's tempting to hibernate. Winter can make us retreat to the house and stay under our blankets, which is totally fine. That's one of the good things about the winter is that we can just be cozy for the most part. And that's what I do most of the winter. But I did realize that I need some connection because if I start losing all of that, then I feel lonelier. It's dark outside, it's quiet, so it helps to be around other people. Some ideas that I've had and have done that have kept me social and mentally well have been doing indoor gatherings with people, trying to come up with indoor activities with friends like game nights. You can play Uno or card games or board games. You can do movie nights, maybe do a movie marathon, or you can even do karaoke. You could do karaoke on YouTube at home, or if you live in a city where there are karaoke places, you can rent out a spot and go there too. All of those things are indoor. It still lets you hang out with people at home or somewhere else without feeling like, oh, there's nobody to see. Even for the holidays, there are different ways to be indoors. For example, for Thanksgiving, let's say you're not seeing family, or if you are, maybe you have an extra day. You could do a Friendsgiving. This is where everyone brings a dish and you all sit around and enjoy your meal together. I've done this year over year and it's really, really fun. Another thing is around Christmas time, right? So Thanksgiving and Christmas are the two holidays around this time. I'm not Christian, but most years I've actually done gift exchanges with friends. It can be actual gifts where you pick numbers out of a hat and then you get to match with someone and exchange the gift. Or if you want some humor, you can do a white elephant party. I actually started doing this with friends in college. And actually, one time we ended up doing this white elephant party. It's when you bring joke gifts and unserious things. And someone's gift was a bootleg version of Hamilton. That's the only version of Hamilton I have ever seen. I've never seen the movie, I've never seen it on stage as a play, but I have seen the bootleg version of Hamilton. And it was a parody, but I thought it was pretty entertaining. Another time during a white elephant party, I exchanged the gift. I don't remember what I brought, but the gift that I got was a pasta. And I guess this is not an explicit podcast, but the pasta was in a certain shape. And I'll let your imagination go where it goes there. But it was definitely a not safe for work shaped pasta, but it was really tasty actually when I cooked that. So you can find different ways to humor yourself during this time as well. Another thing is try to find winter hobbies. If you're someone who likes to stay active, finding some winter indoor sport could be really fun. If you like to run or walk outside but don't want to deal with the cold, you could try to find an indoor track near you where you can still do your walking or running activities. I will say though that walking outside for at least 10 to 15 minutes a day if there's sunlight helps you to get that vitamin D that I mentioned before and some fresh air, which is important even with the briskness of the winter season. Another thing you can do if you want to stay active is join a local sports league for a winter sport, and that also helps you to meet some other people. I mentioned movies with friends, but you might want to think about going to the actual movie theater more often in the winter. I've mentioned this before, but I actually prefer going to the movies when nobody else is there because then it makes me feel like I have the theater to myself. So I typically like to do matinee. If you have time on the weekends, going during the day or going to an earlier showing is usually better because there are fewer people there. Another indoor hobby you could do if you like to read books or there's a local library near you, you can go check that out. But there's more at the library than just books. Fun fact, many libraries have a lot of events And you can see on their website the events section where they host things like game nights, movie nights, cooking classes, or even live music performances. I'm actually going to check out a game night at my local library soon just to see how that is. And they're recurring as well. You never know what you'll find that is indoors. So I definitely encourage you to keep your mind open. And honestly, it's not always about just hustling. Sometimes it's about staying connected and taking it easy on yourself during these tough months. A lot of animals, they're hibernating. They are not trying to do the most. And I don't think we should be doing the most either in the winter. It's okay to just chill and to find some other things that move a little bit slower and taking your time. And being social for at least some parts of it is helpful because community reminds us that we are not alone. And I've certainly felt that way with trying to be more social in the winter, even when I don't want to be. Sometimes I'll have friends over at my place and we'll do a workout together, an indoor Pilates thing together, and then eat dinner together. And that's great. We don't have to go out to a restaurant where we might feel cold or whatever it is, but it's another way for us to still spend time together, but in the house. Now, I've gone over how I personally like to dress in the winter to stay warm, how I try to keep up my energy and my mood, and then also how I try to stay connected with my friends and my community. And with all of that, the big thing for me is really just finding the small joys where I can, because sometimes it can be hard to do that. So, outside of the things that I've already mentioned, I like to have cozy comforts, as I call it. Things like warm hot chocolate or tea. I always order hot chocolate, different types. I'll order hot chocolate that has marshmallows, and I'll order regular hot chocolate. I'll order an assortment of teas, herbal teas specifically, since I prefer herbal things. I'll also order things like tea biscuits, chocolate covered cookies, and just have I call it my tea and chocolate station. I just have a corner of my place where I have all of these things. And if I'm feeling a little down or I'm feeling like I want to stay warm, maybe I'll have some tea. Maybe I'll have a little biscuit. These things help slow things down for me and also just give me a little sugar boost as well. I surround my place with blankets. Some people like to light candles, read, or journal as their way of a cozy comfort. Another thing that I've tried to do is pick a TV series with at least 3 seasons or watching movies that have a part one, two, and three. Because in those days where it's really dark or I really don't want to go outside and socialize, then I can stay cozied up in the house and I'll have a lot of things to watch to keep me entertained. And the last thing I'll say on cozy comforts is if you have the time, if you have the ability to take time off and you have the finances that allow it, I definitely recommend picking a time between December and early March to travel somewhere warmer, even just for a 3-day weekend. It helps to reset energy to make it through the rest of the season. For me, I can get some vitamin D naturally, I can be somewhere warm, just helps me get things in order. And then I can get back to the cold knowing that, hey, spring is just around the corner. There's not too much time to wait. I find that that's something that has helped me extremely. But again, only if you have the time and the ability to, of course, afford that financially. So, I've given a lot to think about today, and I hope that some of these things help you as you prepare for the winter time yourself. We all know that winter is cold, dark, and there is low motivation. I encourage you to celebrate the small stuff like having warm clothes, cozy nights, and brighter mornings. I'm grateful I'm able to have the space to plan for winter and have a warm place to lay my head since not everyone has that luxury. And I hope that you can also have some nice winter comforts. So I'll leave it there for today. A question I do have for you though is what's one thing you can do this winter, big or small, to make the season feel lighter and cozier? Leave your answer for me in the comments. Stay warm and sane this winter. Thanks for listening to another episode of Lush Life, No Labels. Send this to anyone who you know struggles with winter or just wants some ideas on things to do in the wintertime. Cheers to your lush life and see you later.